Hey, listeners, I am super excited about today's recording because today we have Kyle Wheeler from CARR Healthcare Realty joining us. If you are a dental practice owner, then I promise you're going to want to stick around. If you're opening up a practice, if you're expanding your current one, if you're thinking about relocating, or you just want to be more informed, this episode is sure to leave you with some of those, man, I wish I had known that sooner moments. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us. Can you share with us a little bit about your background and how you got into healthcare real estate? Because I feel like that is such a niche area of real estate. So share with us a little bit about what your background is and how you got where you're at today.
Yeah. So I have a really interesting background. I went to school for music. So, serving others has always been a part of who I am. And after college, decided to kind of switch gears and lean more into what I wanted my life to look like, I guess, for lack of better terms. And I got into recruiting. There I really learned that helping people is at the core of who I am. And I made an awesome connection with my sales manager there, who fast forward has actually switched over to working at CARR as well. He'd gotten in touch with me a handful of times, letting me know that he thought that this would be a great opportunity for me. And I took the leap of faith, and it's been the best move that I've ever decided to make in my life. I love helping people, and helping people who help people is really fulfilling to me. And it's been an awesome opportunity.
I love the piece that you said that you really got into this because you wanted to find something that you could help people and you can help, figure out and problem solve and figure out how you can help them. And I love that piece of it, because that is so much of what you do with real estate. And a lot of people don't realize it, but there's a lot of leverage that you have when you work with somebody that is in real estate. And real estate in general is not like, when you're looking at a healthcare practice, it's not going to be the same as working with the real estate agent that helped you buy your house, right? There's different pieces of it that make it so that you're unique and make it so that you can truly help them find the ideal practice, find the, ideal contracted terms.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I always say to people, you wouldn't go see your optometrist to get a root canal. Yeah. So working with specialists, whether it's your real estate agent, your attorney, general contractors, CPAs, consultant, anything in that regard, as specialized as you can get, people who are day-to-day involved in your industry, know your line of work and how your business operates, is only going to help you grow at a faster clip than your competition.
Yeah. Awesome. So one of the reasons why I was so excited to have you on this call, and I'm going to just jump right into it, is because you shared with me how you're helping practices save hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I wanted to dig into this piece specifically because I feel like so many people, including myself, who have been helping practices reduce their rates and save money and build an ideal business, I feel like so many people don't know the impact that you're having with practices. And I wanted to hone in on this piece and talk about, how are you exactly helping practices save hundreds of thousands of dollars without them even really having to do a ton of work themselves?
So, I guess just to give a little bit of a bigger picture here at CARR, we're double niche. So first and foremost, we work with healthcare providers, dentists being a large part of our business. But then secondly, and I'd argue more importantly, we exclusively represent buyers and tenants. The reason being is it eliminates any conflicts of interest in the negotiations. When you're not representing any sellers or landlords, our fiduciary responsibility is solely with our client. And that positions us to achieve most favorable terms in negotiations and maximize the profitability of the practice.
So you're not partnering with people on the buying side. You're partnering with people on the purchasing side. So you're working with the owners themselves and not necessarily the buyers.
Yes. So I'm working with the healthcare provider specifically. So if we have a doctor that is looking to buy land, buy a building, lease a building, or buy a practice, or expand or relocate their practice, And lease renewals, anything on that side of the transaction is where we get involved. If you're a healthcare provider and you own your building and you're looking to sell it, that isn't in our wheelhouse. We only represent doctors who are looking to either purchase or lease space.
Perfect. Okay. So let's talk about the lease and how you guys get involved in current leases, contracts, that kind of stuff. What do you do to help practices when it comes to their current lease?
Yeah. So a lease renewal is a transaction that you can and absolutely should be represented on. Oftentimes that transaction is seen as a formality. A lot of times that might be the first scenario where they're leasing real estate. Other than that, it might have just been like an apartment or something along those lines, which is only a 1-year lease and very simple to navigate. But in a commercial real estate deal, especially for a healthcare provider in a lease space, they're looking at either a 5, 7, or more often than not, a 10-year lease to, recoup the investment that they're making into that lease space with the interior build out that they're having to do. The way that it typically works in commercial real estate is you start off with a base rent figure, and then there's escalations of that base rent every single year. If you start off at $10 a square foot in year 1 and there's a 3% escalation, by year 10, it very well could be over market. So we love to get involved and evaluate the lease early, ideally 2 to 3 years in advance, or even longer. I would love to play the long game. The more time we have, the better. And when we review that lease, we see where their terms are currently at, and then we go to the market and see what the market says and let it speak for itself. And oftentimes, due to the length of that lease, we find that by the end of it, the provider is overpaying, and it's an opportunity to identify alternative options and go to the landlord and say, hey, we'd love to stay here. It's been a great opportunity for us. It's easy for our patients. It's a beautiful building. But in order to do so, we need a fair deal. Otherwise, we're going to have to consider our other options.
You had mentioned ideally 2 to 3 years before their contract is up. Is that why you're looking? Because you want to have more negotiation. You want to have more time.
Yeah, exactly. So commercial real estate is very different than residential real estate. When you're going to buy a house, if you make an offer, you're sending out a legally binding contract, essentially. So if that offer is accepted, you're under contract. So you would never offer on 2 homes at once. You might put yourself in a situation where 2 offers are accepted, and then what do you do? So commercial real estate is kind of the exact opposite. It's all about time and options. You want to be negotiating on multiple properties simultaneously to pit landlords against each other to compete and offer the best terms possible. So in order to have options, we need time. When you have 2 to 3 years, all scenarios are on the table. You're leasing this space. Maybe you're not even interested in moving, but in order to get concessions in the negotiation, we need to have the leverage with the landlord to make him or her believe that that is actually a consideration. So if you have 2 years, we can look at land, we can look at existing buildings, we can look at alternative lease options. All of those scenarios are feasible within a 2-year period. And if the landlord has any level of sophistication, they know that that's true as well. And oftentimes they're going to sharpen their pencil and do anything that they can to retain a dentist, which is a blue chip tenant in their building. But, if you have 6 months left in your lease, it's not an impossible scenario, but it limits our options. We can't go to the landlord with 6 months before expiration and say, hey, we're looking at this land that we're going to consider buying and building a building on. You just can't really make that happen in 6 months. So it makes it a little bit more challenging to get those concessions that we're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say that I were 2 to 3 years out of my contract. Let's say I was, I owned a practice. I was 2 to 3 years out. And I said, you know what? I'm really curious to figure out, am I paying a competitive rate or am I overpaying? And do I have the, potential to save myself money on rent? What does that look like? So when a dentist partners with you, what does that process initially look like? Are you going out and you're running comps, like tell me a little bit about what dentists can expect once they do decide, you know what, Kyle, go ahead and run your numbers and see what you can do for me.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, you know, it'd start off with just an informal introductory call. I'd love just to learn more about themselves and their business and, you know, how things have been going and how they're enjoying their space. And, you know, from there, it's all about just diving into where they're at currently. So I would ask for them to send over a copy of their lease so that I can review the terms, see where their base rent is at, what are the yearly escalations looking like. Do they have any options to renew? Do they have any options to purchase the building? Or did they receive any tenant improvement allowance or free rent on the original deal? And then from there, I'm going to the market and identifying options that could be feasible for that dental office to relocate within a 3 mile radius, whether that's a purchase or a lease scenario. Based on the information that we get from the market, you know, we might see that their current lease, they're paying $20 a square foot, but within a 3 mile radius, there's similar buildings and spaces that are at $15 a square foot. At that point, we have the perfect opportunity to say, here's a building with a perfect size lease space and the visibility we're looking for 2 miles away, and it's only $15 a square foot, and that's $5 less than what you're paying now. You know, from there, we would come up with a strategy and a game plan based on what's most important to them. You know, maybe low rent isn't what's important in the deal at that time. Maybe a refresh of the space and getting some tenant improvement allowance from the landlord to contribute towards that construction is important. Okay, with the rent being where it's at in order to make that happen. Or, you know, maybe maybe there's interest in buying the building that they're in down the road, and getting an option to purchase or a right of first refusal written into the lease is important, so that, you know, sometime in the next lease term they can make a purchase of the building that they're practicing in. There's many different directions it can go. You know, I always say that commercial real estate is the Wild West. There's so many different levers that you can pull in the negotiation. It really just comes down to what is most important to you and your practice, and creating a strategy to make that happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you're not going in with, you know, hey, I'm trying to get you X amount of money. It truly is, what is it that you're trying to build? And let's figure out how we can use the comps and we can use the current market in a way that can help you make that happen. Whether it is remodeling your practice and keeping rent the same, or negotiating, you know, hey, I want to buy this practice in the next X number of years. So you can bake that stuff into their current contract when they go to renew.
Exactly. Correct.
Okay. Okay. I like it. It sounds like you definitely have to get creative. I'm sure that it's a ton of fun trying to renegotiate these deals. And I say that almost sarcastically because I can only imagine that a lot of landlords are used to getting the terms, the current tenant signs it. They don't really even look at the, you know, updates, and they don't look at any of the changes. It's really just an easy transaction for a lot of landlords, especially for dental practices. They sign it. They know that they don't want to leave. They love what they're doing, and they don't even think about what the actual terms are or how they can leverage that to help build the practice of their dreams. So I say that with air quotes because I'm sure that landlords get upset when they have a healthcare realtor coming in and trying to renegotiate rates for their current tenant. Tell me what that looks like. Are you the one that typically has to deal with the upset, you know, landlord, or is it the dentist that has to? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it is really fun. You know, it's not all scenarios are sunshine and roses, and some go really well. But you know, that's all absolutely my job. You know, if you hire me to help you with your lease renewal, at that point, all and any communication with your landlord gets redirected to me. You know, I think a lot of times in these scenarios, our job is to come to the table with facts and data. And the landlord's job is to come to the table with emotions and act like a bull in a china shop to make you think that they're going to kick you out of their building if you don't agree to the terms that they're offering. You know, the landlord is a business person, just like you are and I am, and dentists are as well. They're trying to maximize their profitability just like the rest of us. And, naturally, they're not going to come to you 2 to 3 years in advance and say, hey, your lease is getting a little bit above market. I'm going to knock the rent down $5 a square foot. They're hoping that you see it as a formality and you wait until they call and say, hey, are you looking to stay? And you say yes, and they just send over a lease and you sign it. But like what you're alluding to, little do you know, the rent just keeps going up. You start here in year 1, and then by year 10, you're here. And if you don't negotiate the renewal, you just keep going up and up and up and up until you sell your practice one day. So, is the landlord excited that I'm there? Not necessarily, but if we create the right posture and truly have alternative options that are viable and feasible, they are thankful that we're there because they have the opportunity to retain a blue chip tenant. There's no better tenant than a healthcare provider. They sign longer term leases, they pay rent on time, they have ideal type businesses and patients coming through the landlord's building. They're very thankful that we're there to help retain that opportunity with them. And they know that it's extremely expensive to have a vacancy. In commercial real estate, the average vacancy is 18 to 24 months, and that's extremely expensive for a landlord. So to go in and renegotiate a lease and maybe take a few dollars a square foot out of the landlord's pocket, they're still doing extremely well because they don't have to market the property. They don't have to pay a listing agent. They don't have to pay operating expenses and all that good stuff that come with a vacancy. They just have to give us the concessions that we're looking for. And the best part is, I haven't mentioned this yet, they pay me. I'm a free service for my clients. I'm just here to help make sure that your best interests are protected and you're making as much as you can to grow your practice.
Yeah. And what really stuck out to me is they might not be super happy or thrilled that you're there, but in the long run, you're able to help them see that this is beneficial for the landlord as well. You're not going in and trying to be, sneaky or any of that stuff. You're genuinely going in and saying, you know what, this is what market is. Let's make sure that we level the playing field out and we create a win-win situation for both the landlord and for the dentist. And I think that that's a key piece for people to keep in mind, because so many of you dentists, a lot of your landlords are friends of yours, and they're people that you might hang out with outside of, the business piece of it and things like that. So keep in mind that even if your landlord is your friend, even if this is somebody that you have a close relationship with, this is a business matter. And just like you have a business to run, they have a business to run as well. And so creating a win-win situation for both the landlord and for the dentist. And I think that's the key piece here, is we're just trying to make sure that it's fair for everybody across the board.
Exactly. And in scenarios where, we go in and try and negotiate a renewal and correct the terms, if the landlord isn't wanting to play ball, that's part of the reason why we want 2 to 3 years. So that those alternative options are still options on the table. Although it might not be ideal, sometimes there's clients that I work with that are like, absolutely not, I'm not moving for anything. It doesn't matter what comes up on the market, but the numbers speak for themselves. And if the landlord's not willing to play ball, well, we have enough time to consider those other options still and make sure that at least when your head hits the pillow at night, you know that you made the best decision for your business.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we were talking last week, you also shared there have been dentists where they were in that mindset of, I'm not moving, I don't want to make changes, I'm happy where I'm at. But when you ran the numbers, they realized it's actually cheaper for them to build a practice, and it could be more ideal, and it could be exactly what it is that they've wanted all these years, and it's actually less money for them to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's many times where dentist is practicing in a leased space for 7-8 years and think that that's home base for them for the rest of their career, and they engage with me to look at their lease and help negotiate a renewal. And when we go look at the market, we look at land and we look at buildings for purchase as well. And especially in states like Michigan, I can't speak for all states. Obviously places like Los Angeles or Chicago or Nashville, real estate values are up there. But here in Michigan, owning your real estate is extremely feasible. So through the process of getting our properties for leverage in the lease renewal, we find that there's opportunities to either buy land and build a building or buy a building to own as well and renovate. And it's an awesome opportunity to own something that appreciates at a pretty high clip. Just another arrow in your sack for when you exit later down the road. It's just another thing to have to go along with a practice sale, whether you lease that building to the dentist that purchased your practice or you just sell the building. It's going to appreciate over time, just like your home or anything else that you own.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you did decide to go ahead and build your own practice, doing it 2 to 3 years in advance gives you enough time as a dentist to actually build the practice and to get things up and running. And then you make the move. But it also long term could act as another piece of the payment that you get when you go to retire, or it could also act as another stream of income for you in your retirement because you're renting it out to another dentist who then is paying you rent. And now all of a sudden the roles have flipped and you're the landlord and not the practicing dentist. So long term, it could absolutely make sense. And so I think it's important to know your numbers, right? And maybe owning a practice based off of your location, maybe owning a practice just based off of your own life and your desires, right? Maybe that's not something that you want, but at least know the numbers and at least be able to say why. Why is that not something that you want? So being educated and knowing what those numbers say is going to help you make that decision on whether or not you truly do want that. Sometimes the idea of building a practice sounds so expensive and so overwhelming that it's easy for us to assume makes more sense for me to rent. But when you know what the numbers actually say, sometimes it doesn't. So partnering with someone like you that can help them figure out those numbers is also a really good piece. Now, Kyle, has there ever been a time where you went in, however, you started to dig into everything and then realized there really isn't anything that we can negotiate? The rates look great. There's not much that we can do. Has that ever happened?
Yeah, absolutely. There's from time to time, there are scenarios where you review a lease and rent looks great. It's a situation where for whatever reason, the landlord gave a great deal in the beginning of the lease and, the terms are at market. And at that point, I'm not trying to go in and ruffle any feathers and cause issues just for the sake of getting a deal done. At that point, I would say, hey, your lease looks awesome. There's nothing to really do here. You're at market terms. And assuming that they have an option to renew in the lease, I would say, hey, just exercise that option to renew and have the peace of mind that you have great terms in your lease. In scenarios where there isn't an option to renew already in the lease and, we can't just assume that we can stay there, that's when we can go in and help negotiate a new deal to secure the space for your next 5-10 year term. But I will say 9 times out of 10, again, just due to the length of the lease that the dentist is signing, typically 10 years, there's typically meat on the bone in those negotiations, anywhere from tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah. So as a dentist, you have nothing to lose. You have nothing to lose by saying, you know what, Kyle, just go ahead and take a look. I'm about 2 to 3 years out. Take a look and see if there is any wiggle room or, where I am compared to market price. There's nothing for you to lose. So you might as well partner with Kyle or another CARR representative if you're currently renting or leasing your location. So if you are 2 to 3 years out, I would say it's absolutely worth partnering with somebody that is the expert that can tell you, because at the end of the day, all they're going to do is tell you, hey, your stuff looks great. Let's talk in another couple of years.
Exactly.
Right. And so highly recommend, take a look. If you're about 2 to 3 years out, jump in and say, hey, you know what? Let me partner with this CARR representative that's in my region and see what we can do. Okay, so that's a little piece of what you guys do. It's a very important, very impactful piece of what you guys do. But you also mentioned that you can help practices that or owners that are looking to purchase a location, that are looking, hey, like I want to build my own practice. Tell us how you partner with them.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's an extremely similar process. So, if owning your real estate is your main goal, whether that's buying land and building a building or buying a standalone building that is already a dental office or may not be, or buying a building that has other tenants in it with a vacancy that you can occupy and kind of be an owner occupier and be collecting tenant income from other tenants. Our process is very similar. It's all about time and options, all about pitting sellers against one another. Similarly, we're looking at the market, seeing what the comps say, but then from a negotiation perspective, it's we're looking at this deal over here and this deal over here and going back and forth between both parties saying, hey, we're interested in your building, but we have another option and this is what they're offering. So, in order to stay in the race, we're going to need to come down on the purchase price or whatever that might look like.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So when is the ideal time frame? So let's say I'm a dentist and I know that I want to build my own practice. When is an ideal time frame for me to say, let me start looking at this? Let me start this process.
Yeah, if you're doing a ground up project, that 2 to 3 year timeline is perfect. We got to find the perfect piece of land and then we have to negotiate on the land. Then we have to go through legal and closing and then partner with a general contractor and do all the architecture and design and permitting and then construction. And all of that takes time. So 2 to 3 years in advance for that is ideal. It can be done faster, but to focus on the main thing, which is dentistry and your clinical work, having more time is better, just so that your hair is not on fire through that process. And you can keep the main thing, which is growing your practice. If buying a existing building and renovating it is something that is of interest, I would still say 12 to 18 months in advance. It's not very often that you find second generation dental offices sitting around that are completely vacant and just waiting for us to identify it and say, oh, this is perfect and we're going to move in and it doesn't need any construction. So, oftentimes we're finding a building that was maybe previously a bank and it's a great size, has awesome visibility, perfect parking lot, but it's outfitted as a bank. So there needs to be a project done in order to make it your dental office. And on average, an interior build out in that scenario still takes anywhere from 6 to 9 months. So, similarly, we got to negotiate on the building, do our due diligence, go through the legal process, close on the building, partner with a general contractor to get all your architecture and design completed, and then get to swinging hammers. And again, that just takes time. So I always say, I'd much rather get connected with the doctor that has 7 years left in their lease or prior to their next real estate move so that we can play the long game rather than, hey, 6 months from now, I'd like to buy a building. My lease is going to expire. Nothing is impossible. I would never say that can't be done. It just causes faster moves and more challenges through the process in order to make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you're looking at 2 to 3 years if it's a ground up. If it is like we're purchasing land and we're starting with a clean slate, or if you're looking at turning your old Taco Bell into a new dental practice, but you don't want it to look like Taco Bell, you're looking at like 12 to 18 months to give you time to do all the negotiations, to do the building and go live with it.
Yes, I would rather just get connected as soon as possible. If you just signed a lease last year and you got 9 years left and you think owning a building is something that you want to do in the future, let's chat. I plan to do this for a long time. And so, getting connected sooner than later, although there might not be a ton that we need to do right now, but just to start planting those seeds and checking in over time is perfectly okay with me. It's better to have more time than not enough.
Yeah, absolutely. This happens where you know what you want to build, but the perfect area hasn't opened up yet. And so even if you know, long term, let's say you just signed a 10-year contract, you just got started, but you know long term that you really want to own your own practice. Get to know someone like Kyle. Get to know, build a relationship, because Kyle, you're out there running comparisons and looking at the market, what lands are for sale, what lands are about to be for sale, what the different, areas are and opportunities are. So if you just signed a contract and you know what your ideal area looks like, you know what your ideal market looks like, the best thing you can do, even if it's 10 years from now, is partner with a realtor, healthcare realtor, so that they can also be on the lookout for you, so that they know the minute that ideal lot opens up or that ideal practice opens up, that they can let you know, hey, you know what? I know you still got 7 years left in your contract, but this just opened up. Let's talk. Right. And so start building those relationships, because Kyle's going to have his eyes out and he's going to know what's for sale, what's not for sale, where your opportunities are. So if you truly know what that ideal long-term looks like, you might as well partner with someone that can constantly be, in your corner and looking for those good opportunities to open
Definitely.
up. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So, Kyle, is there anything else? I am excited about the impact that you're making. And I mentioned it before, but I have been in dental for 20 years and I have spent years and years helping practices figure out how they can build their ideal practice, right? That's my whole goal. My whole mission is, how can we help you build your ideal practice? And interesting enough, and I cannot say this enough, I did not know that people like you could be in the back pocket for dentists to help them get the terms that they need to get, save the money that they need to get, and help partner with them through the whole process. So I cannot say it enough. Like, if you are not already working with CARR, Healthcare Realty, and one of their representatives, I highly recommend find the one that's in your region and get partnered with them. Whether you're ready to start making a change and renegotiating rates today, or it's 10 years from now, get and build a relationship with one of their representatives, because you're going to have nothing to lose. You're going to do is you're building a relationship with somebody that's in your area that is an expert in exactly like what it is that could be that make or break on helping you build that ideal practice. So highly recommend, if you're not already in the works with them, reach out, find out who your CARR representative is and start building a relationship with them, because they can have a bigger impact than anybody really even realizes. But now that I realize, now I'm like, everybody needs to know about you guys. So if you're interested, if you're in the Michigan area and you're interested in partnering with Kyle, Kyle's email address is kyle.wheeler@carr.us. So that's kyle.wheeler at carr, CARR.us. Highly recommend, reach out to him. If you don't know who your representative is, send Kyle an email and he can connect you to your representative as well. So again, Kyle, thank you so much for being on the call today. I really do believe that what you're doing is impacting practices more than any of us realized. And I really do believe that every single dental practice in the US needs to have a CARR representative. So I appreciate you taking the time to jump on the call and share a little bit about the impact that you guys are making